Hi guys, welcome to yet another video. I've got my sketchbook right here, and as you can see, the sketchbook is nearly filled. There is, however, one thing missing, and that is the first page. It's still empty, so it's time to finally get around to that, so we're gonna do that today together. Let's go. Okay, so I have already kind of thought about what I want on the first page. My first thumbnail is this one. So I want to draw this girl, just like looking right at you, you know, and with a little flower covering the other eye because that's aesthetic, and then just like flowers everywhere because I already have this thing stuck in here, which is from an envelope that I got from a friend, and I really want to like continue this motif almost of the flowers. And down here is my palette, so I really want like warm, bright, you know, summery colors. Summer is almost ending already. It feels like it has just started. So we're just gonna like capture summer. Let's just get to drawing, shall we? Even though I had all of the colors planned out already, I still had to find the right alcohol markers that fit that color palette. So I made little color swatches in order to find the ones that I would like for this illustration. I made sure to do it on the same paper as the finished illustration because colors can look different from each other depending on what paper you're using. So I started with the colors for the character, so mostly warm like sandy colors, but I'll also be using some of these colors for the flowers so that everything fits nicely together. I made sure to write the number of the marker next to the color so I would be able to find it again if I wanted to use it. I will mostly be using twin markers in this video, but I also have some Panduro markers that I'll be using. So next up are the pink and red colors. For the greens, I sadly don't have any like real good, pretty, sappy green colors, but we'll have to make do with what we have. I do have this nice pastel green one and this like putty color that is just mwah, it's so dirty, I love it. After swatching all of the colors, I got my red pencil and put a little heart besides the colors that I plan on using. Next up, I swatched all of my blues and yellows for the flowers. For the line art, I'm still not sure if I want to use marker or pencil or fine liners or whatever, but for now there's these two markers. And subsequently collected all of the markers. So here are all of the colors that we'll be using. I'll probably add more for shadows here and there and other flowers, but for now it's finally time to start the illustration. Actually, I found some more green markers that don't have these nice brush tip that are amazing to draw with, but they are much closer to the color that I'm looking for, so we'll also be using those. First of all, let's get everything out of the little pockets. I have this beautiful piece of paper with Demon Slayer that'll help us accent the sketch beyond the page. I was planning to do the sketch in this colored pencil, but after realizing I would only have one chance because I would not be able to erase the pencil, I got way too scared and I actually decided to just use my good old trusty mechanical pencil. So as expected, I started with the sketch and right at the start I was very happy that I decided to use a graphite pencil because just getting the face like on the right spot on the paper already took like 3 attempts. So I obviously started with like the big shapes and then just gradually gave them more detail. For the flower covering the eye, I decided to go with an Icelandic poppy. I do not know what the difference between a normal poppy is and an Icelandic poppy. They might be bigger, they might be available in more colors. Honestly, I don't even know how big they are, so maybe I drew it way out of proportion, but for now, I really like how this sketch for the poppy turned out. At this point, I realized that this composition really reminded me of another first page I did around 2 or 3 years ago. At the time, I was really proud of it, and I honestly still kind of like it. I like the warm grays, the colors. After the graphite sketch was done, I just went section by section, erasing the pencil and replacing it with the color pencil. There is not too much to comment on this other than I was so scared I was gonna mess this up because I honestly really liked the sketch. So one thing that I knew even before having any idea of what to put on the first page, I knew that I wanted to use alcohol markers because I have a lot of them and I don't use them all too often. And as far as I can remember, I have not used them in the sketchbook at all. And if there's graphite underneath colored pencil, you won't be able to erase it, so I had to make sure that I fully erased it. But if I fully erased it, I didn't know what was underneath anymore. But I think in the end, the red line art turned out well. Normally, I definitely don't have this much patience when it comes to just drawing in my sketchbook, but I really wanted to make the first page as good as I can. After having traded all the gray for red and finishing all the details, it was finally time to start coloring. So I started with the skin, as I always do, because that is the part that I enjoy the most, and after that we'll figure it out. I first tested out the colors on the ear because even though I deliberately picked all of my colors out, I wasn't certain how they would look on the face yet. I tried blending the colors with the blush color and the color combination looked great, so I decided to go on to the rest of the face. The marker that I was using was a little bit streaky, as you can see, but I can't really blame it because the markers are many years old and I'm honestly surprised that they're not like all dried out. And they were also very cheap. At this point I found out that one of the markers that I was planning to use for the blush was... I mean, just look at it. However, this ended up working quite well because I was really able to like kind of feather on the blush color and then just like blend everything out with the base skin color. The marker with the messed up tip was this nice saturated orange color that really just like brought more life to the skin. But I mean, just looking at this nib, I don't know, it's certainly making me feel things. After some confusion, I found out that there was one marker that had different numbers on each end. So it had 139 and also 134. I'm pretty sure that 139 is the original marker, so I ended up swapping them later, but that definitely brought some confusion. So for the skin, I mostly added just shadows and blush wherever I felt like I needed to do so. You know, under the chin, on the nose, the eyes, the lips, you know, everything. Next up was the hair. I started with the eyebrow, which from the moment I put down the first color, it was already a mess. I just had to add more lines, more colors, and darken it here and there. Also add more skin around it and whatnot throughout the whole process. The original design of the girl is more of like a strawberry blonde rather than a normal blonde, but I'm still struggling either way a bit with the contrast between the skin and the hair. But with the markers I had, I couldn't really find a nice base strawberry blonde color, so I went for more of a blonde. I used a Panduro marker for this, and immediately I noticed that the brush of these markers is so soft, like it kind of just feels like it's falling apart. And you can't really get nice clean edges with it. Like it was a little too soft to be able to control it, but if there were parts that were like too small to get like details in with the brush nib, I could just switch to the chisel nib. Adding shadows to the hair was a little tricky as well. As I mentioned before, I wanted the hair to look strawberry blonde, but I couldn't quite catch the right shading color. So I'm like using these 3 or 4 markers at the same time, trying to add contrast. It was also at this moment that I realized that I am 1, not very experienced when it comes to using markers, and 2, not very experienced when it comes to shading hair, so it was a bit of a struggle. But you know, I tried my best. In the end, I ended up adding details with the red colored pencil, and that really helped to just like tie it all together. I felt like the hair just needed to be like a little less saturated, and if it were digital art that would have been very easy, but alas it was not. So I decided to add some warm gray markers and browns to like add more contrast and to just like really push the dark areas and make it look a little less saturated, but at some point I wasn't even sure what I was doing myself. Anyways, next up is the eye because it looked very lifeless. I normally color the eyes when I do the face, but this time I just forgot. The eye was another part that was kind of tricky. I started with the white of the eye and I had this very harsh line between where I shaded and where I didn't shade with like the warm gray. So I decided to bust out the colorless blender. Does anyone know how to actually use this thing? I'm convinced no one is, but somehow it worked. It helped and it really blended the shading, and shout out to the colorless blender, I guess. Then for the iris, I started with a nice pale blue color and I gradually added more darker colors at the top of the eye. I also added some yellow to, I don't know, I was like, what if we add yellow? And I actually really like how it looks because it just makes the eye pop more and just makes it more interesting instead of just being blue. For the pupil, I wasn't quite sure how dark I wanted it relative to the rest of the illustration, so I kept it like a medium warm gray. And with most of our character done, the flower was up next. I was incredibly hesitant which color to use. I was gonna go for blue, but then I realized blue poppies don't exist as far as I could find. So I was like, okay, we'll make it purple. And then I realized those also don't exist. So I ended up jumping in with that bold, saturated red color we saw earlier. It was kind of scary because it was a very bold color, but I like it. I think it was a good choice. So I noticed that many Icelandic poppies have this like whitish border around the corner of the flower, so I tried mimicking that with like flicking my brush sort of inwards so there would be like white left. The seeds or stems or whatever it's called from the flower were yellow, and I used the most brightest yellow I could find for some reason. Then for the middle part, the part that's more or less green, I used this putty color that I mentioned earlier. It's such a dirty color, but it's so perfect for this. So here's my swatch sheets for the markers that I got for some reason. I did not use this for anything, but I realized maybe I do need some browns for the hair, so I think that's what I was looking for. Especially, you guessed it, in the eyebrow, because that was still a mess. But I added more details here and there in the hair and where not. And also I grabbed the trusty red colored pencil again and added, you know, more details. And just more definition here and there because some places still really needed it. And I feel like especially in the hair, it just pulled it all together and just made it look, you know, better. Also finally fixing the eyebrow here. So for the background, I had already planned out that I wanted like a nice light blue. To be more specific, I wanted to use this 178 Cool Shadow color. Having put it down in the corner, however, I found it too green, like the hue, and I went looking for another marker. So I found this one, but it was too dark, and then I ended up going with this marker Frost Blue 182. And after like 6 strokes, he was already dried out. I was like, it's not gonna survive the entire background. So what did I do? I went back to my original plan and I used Cool Shadow. Even though it was still a little too green, I ended up getting quite a nice even wash of color. I also made sure to erase the sketchbook text in time, because from experience I know that if you go over graphic with a marker, you will also not be able to erase it. Next up, adding even more details to the girl, mostly the hair. Already needing to sharpen my pencil once more, ensuring that it's crisp and sharp. And guess what? I tried fixing the eyebrow one more time. At this point, I want to mention that I only later found out that the face is like quite elongated. This is because I wasn't able to see it from like a top view, but very much from like the sidelines. So in my eyes it looked fine, but like if you look at it from the top, which you guys have been doing the entire video, it's just a little stretched, you know. But there's nothing you can do about that anymore. Now all that was left for the right page was to add text back in, so that is exactly what I did. I measured out exactly where I wanted all of the letters, and then I proceeded to completely ignore them and just write down Sketchbook 20. I decided to keep the little flowers in their hair white. I wanted to make them like a light blue or an indigo or something, but with the background already being blue, I thought that maybe it would lose the contrast and would just blend in with the background, and with the background being blue, the white already actually like stood out well enough, so I left them white. I did make the little insides yellow though. Yeah, next up, of course, we needed more contrast, definition, and details with this red marker. Although I must say I really like how much how much this red marker made it pop, because it's just bright, boom, red, you know. Anyways, only one thing left, and arguably the most satisfying part: highlights! I needed something opaque, so I used my gouache for this part. I added some highlights in the eye, hair, and can't forget to make the lips extra juicy, of course. I felt like the white of the poppy was looking almost transparent with the warm shading that I used, so I went in with like a blue and kind of made it cool toned, or at least in my best, so that it wouldn't look transparent. And with that, the right side is done. You guys deserve a close-up because you watched all the way to here. And you get to see all the little blends and textures. So it's the next day, guys, and time to draw on the left side of the page. But first I added a little bit of acrylic marker to the poppy because I felt like the seeds that we made, the brightest yellow we could find, didn't pop as much as I wanted. So I went over with an acrylic marker. I decided to draw some flowers on the left page. Since I'm not also experienced with drawing flowers with alcohol markers, I experimented with drawing flowers on the swatch page first, and I really like how they turned out, honestly. I really wanted to keep them like soft and mostly pastel, so I decided against line art. So slowly I just filled in most of the page. I first did the flowers and later the stems because alcohol markers are not opaque at all. And since I had not planned out the composition beforehand, which in hindsight maybe I should have done that, I did not want to leave any leaves or stems covering other flowers, and in the end I think it turned out well. I really like it. Oh, and here I realized that the pocket is actually really dirty and tried to clean it a little bit with an eraser. It came to my attention that I have actually not tried alcohol markers in the sketchbook once, since this is a multimedia sketchbook with quite good paper, but it also works alright with water-based art supplies. Although it serves to say I did not use any watercolor myself. I am a little afraid that the paper kind of like sucked up, absorbed a lot of the alcohol ink, but with just, using it on one page, it doesn't really matter. With the sketchbook tour coming up as one of the next videos that will already be long enough, I wanted to talk a bit about my thoughts on this sketchbook, some pros and cons. So we're starting with the paper. The paper is really nice and thick and has like a slight texture that is honestly pretty yummy, especially if you use like water-based supplies. For the alcohol markers, it actually worked fine well. Then for graphite and colored pencils, it actually works quite well as well. It just leaves in like a little bit of a paper texture, but you can work with that, and honestly I think that's great. As for gouache or acrylics or whatever, I have not used those in the sketchbook, so I can't say how well those work, but I think they should work alright because the paper is pretty thick. I have, however, used acrylic markers and those did work really well. I like the A5 size, although I do have to say that I wish it were like a little more square, so shorter or wider, but that's just my personal preference. Right now it feels like it's so stretched, right? The binding was a little annoying, especially when nearing the end of the sketchbook, because the paper could not lay flat easily. I do have to say that the sketchbook was sent to me by Artex for free to try out, but the opinions are very much my own as I have spent many hours in this sketchbook. So online I found out that the sketchbook goes for around 20 euros or $22, which is definitely more on the pricey side for 60 sheets or 120 pages. So if you're willing to spend that on a sketchbook, I would recommend it because the paper is really nice and thick. But there are definitely cheaper options out there. So that'll cover it for my sketchbook thoughts. Being nearly done with the bouquet, I suddenly remembered that I wanted to write welcome on the pockets. Luckily there was a little bit of space left at the bottom, so I decided to just write welcome there, but what is working with alcohol markers if not grabbing the wrong color every now and then? So yes, I grabbed the wrong red. I noticed this after I'd written all the letters, so I just went over it with the right red color, and I don't think it's too noticeable. We'll keep it at that. Also, my letters are a little floating all over the place, but it's fine. Around the spine, I decided to add like little flowers, just like a pattern with like some of the colors that we use, and I think it's so cute. Look at it. And that will be it for the video. I really hope that you enjoyed coming along with me as I finally drew on the first page. Let me know what you think of this style of filming with the voiceover. It's my first time doing something like this. Also let me know if you're someone who always skips the first page as well, because I cannot be the only one, right? And with that, I will see you guys in my next video, which will probably be the sketchbook tour. So if you wanna see that, maybe stick around, maybe drop a little subscribe or comment even, you know, the YouTube stuff. Who knows when that actually happens. I will see you guys in my next video, and until then, happy sketching. Bye bye.